25th. If you could please stand for the invocation and pledge.
O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us thankful for your loving providence and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, with that, you want me to hand it over to you, Mr. Rosenthal? Is that the plan, sir?
That's fine.
It's always
Commissioner,
fantastic
do I
to
have
see
roll
you.
call?
Oh, roll call, yes, I'm sorry. Hold on. Yeah, that's important.
District 1, Commissioner Oakley.
Here.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Okay. Here.
District 3, Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
District 5, Commissioner Mariano.
Here.
District 4, Chairman Wells.
Here, thank you very much.
Commissioner, I'd like to introduce our director, Mr. Pitos. He's going to get our meeting started by introducing the speaker.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the September 25 Board of County Commissioners workshop for the mobility fee update study. The project began last October at a workshop similar to this one, in which a number of initiatives were discussed for the update study, and we'll go through some of those initiatives today in the PowerPoint presentations. Since October 2017 and the ensuing months after that, PDD worked toward the formation of the Mobility Fee Advisory Council and worked on some of the activity needed to prepare for the project. The Mobility Fee Advisory Committee actually began meeting in April. They had one meeting in April. They had two meetings in May, one meeting in June, and the final meeting in August of this year. And we'll go through a presentation today of what the Mobility Fee Advisory Committee discussed and present the results to date of the update study. With me today for the presentation is Bill Oliver, to my left here. He's our consultant through AECon that worked on the project for Pasco County. Pat Gastaway is the chairman of the Mobility Fee Advisory Committee, who's on my right here. David Goldstein was the chief assistant county attorney, and Ernie Monaco, who was planning and development as well. And with that introduction, I'll pass the baton on to Bill and start the presentation.
Okay, great, thanks. Jerry. Right, okay, so I've got about a 15-slide presentation. Hope to go through it maybe in less than maybe 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes perhaps. But if you have questions or need to interrupt, it's a workshop, I understand, so feel free. And what I want to do in the first several slides, since I believe 3 of y'all are new to the mobility fee update process, I've got 3 or 4 slides at the very beginning to kind of give you an overview of what mobility fees are all about, how they're developed, and so forth. And then we'll move into the changes that have happened since the last update study. So looking at the slide, I guess, you have mobility fees because you need to fund infrastructure, in this case transportation. You've had either a road impact fee or a mobility fee since 1985 to help pay for transportation infrastructure, expanding the capacity of your system. In 2011, with the passage of some state legislation that encouraged incentives, that encouraged urban denser developments and discouragement of urban sprawl, there was the state legislature opened the door to what I call a modern mobility fee, which has additional features in it than the old traditional road impact fee did. And so that transition was made in 2011. Periodic updates are required to be sure your fee is current and reflects current data. So Pasco County updates has been on a path of updating its fee every 3 years. So 2011 was your first. It was last updated in 2014, and this is the 3rd cycle of update to that process. So those are the key things here. The one other key finding is that essentially the fees have been held constant since 2011. So that's, I think, an important thing that we've been fortunate to be able to do. Don't know if we'll be able to continue to do that as we move forward into the future because things are changing. Costs are going up. So, in addition to funding infrastructure, one of the features that guides how your fee is developed is that one of the objectives is to incentivize desired forms of development, primarily types of development that bring jobs to Pasco County. Let's see, yes, there are other good reasons to have one, but one of the primary feature I think that staff is excited about is the ability to provide incentives to encourage economic development of Pasco County. So how is the fee calculated? How do we arrive at what that fee is? The fees basically are based on how much of your transportation infrastructure a piece of development or a development consumes. And that's expressed typically in terms of the number of trips you generate times the length of those trips. And so basically, if you have a development that generates a lot of trips, or you have a development that has longer trip lengths than other types of development, then that land use is likely to pay a higher fee per unit of development than those other developments. We also recognize, though, that when that travel is made, that because of the way your revenue program is set up, it's generating revenues that are applied to transportation, and so we credit back to that land use the revenues that it generates for expansion of your transportation system. And so that's the credits part of the equation. And then there are incentives. Incentives are policy-based discounts, if you will, to the fee program that you have chosen to provide based on the benefits of attracting that type of land use to Pasco County. One of the key features of the incentives is that you need to fund it if you've decided to give a particular land use or development a discounted mobility fee, then you must, to maintain equal protection principles, you must backfill or pay that discount from a source of revenue that comes not from growth, from people who have already been here for 25 years or more. And so there's kind of a budget check that we do as we go through the mobility fee process to be sure you can maintain that backfill requirement. So as I didn't say it, but we have your current fee program. Currently has 3 fee districts. The south, the purple district is we call the urban district. The suburban district is that yellow area kind of in the middle. Rural district up in the northern part is the green area. And basically the way the fees are set up, and the fees generally are the lowest in the urban district, and they're the highest out in the rural district. And that's mostly based on technical merits. The lengths of trips that happen in the rural area are typically longer because land uses are spread out. People who live in the rural areas tend to travel into the suburban district or into the urban district or elsewhere for many of their needs. So trip lengths are longer, that contributes to higher fees. In addition, the quality of service that the county intends to provide in the transportation system is better in the rural district. More congestion is considered acceptable in the urban district. So the quality of service that the county intends to deliver in each of those 3 districts has an influence, excuse me, on the fee that's paid. So that's kind of part of the rationale. And you can see here your current fee rates for the single-family dwelling unit. We kind of use that single-family dwelling unit as a benchmark to compare fees and districts, 1,500 to 2,500 square foot single-family unit. And as you can see in the urban district, it's $5,800 and going up to $9,800 in the rural district. So that's kind of the brief overview of what the mobility fee is. And the mobility fee can be expended for any transportation purpose, capital needs. And that basically is a facility or a piece of equipment or something that has an economic life of 5 years or more, as defined in the Florida statutes. Okay, so let's shift a little bit and take a look at what has changed since 2014 and what kind of influence that has on the mobility fee rates themselves. There are many factors that affect what that mobility fee is, but these are kind of the more significant factors. First of all, since 2014, the costs of constructing infrastructure have increased. Based on the data we've had, we've estimated it's increased by about 6.7%. And that has an effect of increasing what the fee might be. We've expanded the incentives program a little bit to address infill development and some residential development in the rural area, and we'll talk about those a little bit later in the presentation. But because we're trying to provide additional incentives, it requires additional revenue, which then has a tendency of suppressing what that fee, or increasing how much that fee might be. On the positive side, your revenue outlook is much stronger than what was envisioned back in 2014. Primarily, your tax increment district for transportation, the forecasted revenues out of it because of an increasing property tax base is significantly stronger than what was estimated back in 2014. And so that means you have more revenues available to fund incentives, which came in handy. Growth rates are slower, which is good because if you have a certain revenue stream, if you're trying to keep up with a fast growth rate, you have a harder time doing it. If you have a slower growth rate, it fits better. So with growth rates being slower, you don't need quite as much revenue to keep up with growth. And so that has the ability to reduce how much of a fee you need.
Bill, I want to clarify that statement. They're
Yeah.
slower than what was assumed in 2014.
Yes.
Really?
Now, rate of growth is probably higher now than it was in 2014, but what we assumed the rate of growth would be in 2014 was higher than what we were assuming now. The Beaver population estimates were
That's right, they just were all reduced.
correct.
A little bit, yeah.
And we also brought into this mobility fee calculation a more substantial, well, because the property tax forecast was stronger, the county also feels they will be spending more of that revenue on transportation system expansion than we assumed back in 2014. So that fifth item is that the tax increment self-credit was increased this year, which allows us to have protects or keeps the fee lower. So those are some of the key things across the board in the 2018 fee schedules that should be in your package. There are 11 fee schedules that we've developed. Each schedule has 81 land uses. We've introduced 5 new land uses into the schedule, and we'll go over those in just a second. And then per the direction that y'all gave us in the October 17th workshop that we had when we kicked the project off, the fees have remained the same. For most of the land uses, we had reductions in the fee in certain cases where the technical merits required that we reduce the fees, not by a whole lot, but some of them were. But the simpler statement is no fee increase. So we were able to maintain the direction that we were given back in that October workshop when we kicked the project off. And the reason is because of the stronger revenue primarily because of the stronger revenue forecasts. So the new land uses that were introduced. Y'all are apparently experiencing a bonanza in the non-veterinary kennel, which is otherwise commonly known as a doggy daycare. No land use had been provided for such land uses, so they're introduced. Restaurants that serve breakfast and lunch only. I'm thinking like First Watch type of thing that are open for breakfast and lunch, or some diners just serve breakfast and lunch. The fast casual restaurant is a newly emerging land use. This is the type of restaurant where you go in, you order at a counter, you pick your food up, you go sit down at a table and have a reasonably good quality meal. Panera's, Chipotle, Hayway, are the types of restaurants that are common in. I actually heard a piece on NPR the other day where there's many more such restaurants coming out there and they're on their way. Ice skating arena is a new land use that's been introduced over the past 3 or 4 years. Y'all have had ice skating facilities come in, and actually that fee rate was almost kind of like pre-negotiated before we got into this study. So we basically have replicated that fee program.
Would the new trampoline warehouse
It's already built.
facilities fit in that category as well?
There is a recreational land use category, and
So
so I
the
don't
answer
think.
is no, that's a specific rate for the ice hockey facility that
Okay,
you all created when we adopted, when we had the ice hockey facility come.
okay.
But the Bill's right, there's a general recreation rate that could apply to the trampoline facility.
Okay. So, well, I'll wait for questions, but I have a question.
Well, actually, if Bill's fine with questions
Yeah.
now.
Okay,
you're-
so what were we doing with, say, breakfast, lunch restaurants before?
That's a good question.
So they were being assessed the same rate as a sit-down restaurant that served all 3 meals.
So this is a reduction
So
for
it's a
this?
reduction in the fee for if you just serve breakfast and lunch.
Okay, what if you're a restaurant that serves only dinner?
That would be probably the quality restaurant. There's a quality restaurant category where you sit down, have a nice meal, usually you take about an hour and a half to 2 hours at a good restaurant to have dinner. So that would probably fall into that category of restaurant.
Which
Okay.
quality?
Which we have.
Which, quality is gonna be lower than fast casual or fast food or even high turnover.
Because it's less trip generation.
Right.
I think Outback used to fit in that because they didn't serve lunch, but I think they serve lunch now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, what happens when a restaurant came in as a quality and then opened for lunch?
Which is okay. I mean, an Outback Steakhouse would fit in the quality category, whether it serves lunch or dinner, basically.
Okay,
The really issue is how often they did turning their tables around.
right.
That's the real issue. So whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, that's the main issue.
So the fast casual is gonna be a higher rate than a quality?
Yes.
It's higher than like a high turnover sit-down restaurant, but it's lower than fast food. So the issue right now is these folks are being assessed, I believe, as fast food restaurants.
Okay,
And
Which is
so,
a very high rate.
which they don't want to be assessed as fast food restaurants. They generally don't have drive-throughs, so they don't have the same volume as a fast food restaurant does.
And this is just for when they come into business, right? This fee?
When they build.
When they build it.
Yeah, we don't assess this on existing businesses.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yes, I'm sorry, this is a one-time fee. When you pull your
Yeah.
building permit, you build a structure, you pay the fee.
I thought it was, but I just wasn't sure.
I should have said that.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, sir. So I ran into a few issues when I had discussions with some people, especially in the Wesley Chapel area, where they were getting charged, i.e. the same rate as a fast food restaurant, when they were like a bakery, for example, at a mall. And this happened at Wiregrass Mall. We were charging them very high fees because we didn't have a separate category.
So,
And these are, the volume isn't even remotely close, or the traffic isn't even remotely close to what comes into a fast food restaurant, or probably not even as a breakfast, lunch only restaurant or anything similar to that.
Where's bakeries at?
pardon me?
Nothing but seats. Was assessed at high turnover.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
That was
well,
one of them.
Yeah, high turnover is a little different than fast food.
Yeah, but they still, it's not, it shouldn't even fit in those categories at all. Compared to, because the amount of people coming there to pick up orders is nothing even remotely close to any of those, or even with the one you spoke of earlier, that's not listed.
So we don't have a separate rate for bakeries, I don't believe.
And then when I talk about it, and then we're talking about one, not like Olga's down the street. We're talking about somewhere where you order ahead, you pick something up, and you leave. It's not a eat-in place. It's they're making, like you said, they're making cakes and things like that. This isn't let's go pick up a donut.
I think, if I may, I think in the case of of the scenario that you're talking about, that was an establishment that was basically assessed a high turnover restaurant according to the 35% rule of the mobility fee ordinance, which is that if it's part of a shopping center where there's a predominant use that exceeds 35% of the shopping center, the other uses then fall into that category.
Yes, that's what happens now,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous.
Explain that again?
In the mobility fee ordinance, there's a provision that states
They
that
paid
if
it, but
that-
still,
that
they
if-
shouldn't have had to.
a certain use predominates within the shopping center, up to 35%.
If a certain use predominates, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Are you
So
saying
it can
if there's
be-
a lot of bakeries in a shopping?
No, that's not-
No, that if 35% of the customers go to the bakery shop? What do you
No,
mean by that?
In this case, there was a high turnover restaurant as part of the shopping center that took
Next
about
door.
35% of the space of the shopping center.
In the same plaza is what
In
he's
the
saying.
same
So
plaza.
imagine a building and there's 4 leased spaces. He's stating that the one next door was that. So, but it's in
Yeah.
the same plaza.
So the high
It was an
turnover-
out parcel. This was an out parcel.
So, that rule that he's talking about, sometimes it benefits people, sometimes it doesn't. I think this is a particular
It didn't
case.
benefit them. They paid it, but it
Well,
still didn't benefit.
the place where it benefits is if you have a fast food restaurant that locates in a general commercial strip center, they'll be assessed the general commercial rate, as opposed to,
But these people got hosed.
I understand that, but I'm saying that rule tends to benefit some and not benefit others. I mean, we could eliminate the rule and just assess everybody the specific use rate, but that probably would have the effect of increasing some people's fees. And I'm just, like, the people, you get like a Five Guys, okay, gets
Right.
located in a commercial strip center.
Mhm.
Right now, they're paying the general rate of just general commercial rate.
Oh, so they're not paying the fast,
They're not paying the fast food rate. So we could get rid of that 35% rule, which is fine, just assess everybody the specific use rate. But it's going to have the effect of increasing the fees for some people. There are rare cases, and this bakery is probably one of them, where it actually causes them to have to pay a higher fee than when they would otherwise would have paid.
But, and I can appreciate that, but to me, that's it's a circumstance where we should have looked at closer, and if you need to make an exception, you have to make an exception to the rule. You have the ability, and then ultimately the board has the ability to make that exception.
So
And again, they paid it because they wanted to open. They didn't want to sit
so we
around
have- we have
for
processed
6 months with this,
at
just
least
a
one alternative
TCO,
standard
but
to the 35% rule. And so in theory, I don't think you can process an alternative standard to the fees, but the application of 35% rule, we have processed alternative standards to. So I think that could have been an option for that bakery. I don't know,
that wasn't explained to them that way. I don't want to get into a battle about something like that, but I'm just using this as an example because it could come up again as growth happens, especially on the 54 corridor. You know,
Don't they always have the right to do an independent study, though?
or they could have done an
Yes.
independent study too.
how much does an independent study cost?
I don't know the answer
I
to the question.
would guess in the 10.
Over there, Pat, how much does an independent study cost?
Not being an expert in transportation, I would say that would probably be a great question for Bill.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I would guess, probably I'd say from 8 to 15,000.
Oh my gosh, how can a bakery that sells cookies pay that?
Well, the answer is,
well, they didn't even sell that. They
the
sold
study
cakes.
procedures require that you find 3 similar sites that are willing to let you study their site.
Yeah.
Go and do the traffic count data collection, go send staff to interview people and find trip lengths. It's a study, it's a process.
How do you get traffic data for someone walking into a bakery in a mall?
You can interview them and ask them how they came and how they left, where they're going. It's a manual process.
So I think the way to address those in the future would be to either be through the independent study or through an alternative standard request. I'm a little concerned about getting rid of the 35% rule just because I think you're gonna get people that are gonna start complaining to you.
Reasonable. One other thought there too, I think that the fee that's paid should be tracked to the store itself. So in a sense, if he's paid more perhaps than he should have, at least that fee stays with the with that building, with that structure as an asset.
It would.
That gets passed on to a subsequent user.
Right, if another person takes over that space, they're not gonna have
With
to
a
pay
different use.
another fee,
It's already paid.
because they were already assessed the fee of that building.
So in a sense, it's an enhanced
That,
value.
that leads me to a question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So, I know, many of us are very concerned about US 19 and redevelopment on 19. So if someone's coming in and, redoing a building or knocking one down and building a new one, they don't have to pay impact fees?
They don't have to pay
Mobility
mobility
fees?
fees. We made that change in 2014. So in 2014, we added a new exemption for the West Market area that said if you're redeveloping in the West Market area, you don't pay any mobility fee, even if you're building a new use that generates more trips.
Okay,
So throughout the county, you always get credit for a prior use or demolishing, but in the West Market area, even if you were building, taking down a single-story home and putting up a high-rise, you're still paying zero mobility fee.
okay. And I, just as a
But you
balloon,
know,
trial balloon, I'm hoping we can
Other
do
year.
something with even more fees on the 19 corridor, but today we're just discussing mobility fees. I'd like to get rid of
Well,
other
the
development
advantage you have with mobility
for a period
fees
of time.
that you may not have with other fees is you have these other funding sources like gas tax, penny for Pasco, and the tax increment that can be used to subsidize the impact of those uses. We had this discussion with schools when we did the school impact fee. They didn't have another revenue source to use to buy down the fees for schools. I don't know if utilities has another revenue source to buy down their fees. And so that's the issue when you get into other fees, is you gotta have some other non-impact fee revenue source to basically.
Property
subsidize.
values, ad valorem, from
You can use ad
nothing to
valorem, but
something.
you can use ad valorem, but then you're taking ad valorem from somebody else,
Yeah.
the sheriff, or, there's,
Right.
that's the
I mean,
issue.
a TIF, increase
Well,
values. I mean, if
so-
you've got a building that's
Which we have a tip,
condemned and.
we have
I
a
mean,
tip for transportation, the 33% tax income district. You could do that for other things, but keep in mind, every time you add stuff to the TIF, you're taking out of your general fund.
Right. Mr. Chairman? One of the things with the tax increment financing program we put in place was because of taking 33% of the money to go to transportation. If you're gonna start bringing in new development along 19, which otherwise is not happening from the
Right.
numbers that we've
It's
looked
not
at,
happening.
all you're gonna do is, if you take a empty lot
Slowly, too slowly.
and put a $300,000 property, you're getting 33% of that tax revenue coming in. So if all that's gonna flow, it's not like you were losing anything anyway because nothing was coming, but you're gonna put an incentive to go forward, it's still gonna get funded, just with the 33% transportation fees.
Right, so their impact still is in excess of that 33% tax increment. It is. But for mobility fees, we already have the existing incentive for redevelopment, and we're about to talk about a new incentive for infill development in the West
Okay.
Market area.
Right, yeah.
Say that one more time?
We're about to talk about a new incentive for infill development in the
Oh,
West
that's right,
Market
yeah.
area. So I think we're doing a lot to address the West Market area. I can't help you on utility impact fees and school impact fees today because they're not before you. But that would require some non-ad valorem revenue source to basically subsidize their impact. And we'll have to deal with that when we get to utilities and schools and parks and other impact fees. But for mobility, I think we've done about all we can. I mean, it's zero for redevelopment in the West Market.
Aren't all the utilities there already? What,
Okay, so we don't have any of the utility people here. I can't, I don't really feel comfortable talking about utility impact fees today. I believe it's for addressing plant capacity, right? That you're basically reserving plant capacity with that fee. So now, I believe utilities also gives credit for a prior use as well. So if there was already a use there, they're gonna give credit for whatever meter was already there. But if you have a brand new use, brand new vacant infill lot in the West Market area, in theory, it's generating additional waste and it's consuming additional water for which they have to reserve capacity in the plant. But I don't want to talk too much about utilities today because that's not what I'm really prepared to talk about.
Mr. Oakley. So when we look at mobility fees in the three different areas, are we gonna try to balance them out where they're all closer to each other?
So that.
Because that's been part of the problem I've had in the past. The rural area is being charged with impact, mobility impact and all the fees has been 18 to 20,000 out here in the country, and a lesser amount in the urban area like in Wesley Chapel and those areas. And that's bothered our citizens. They're concerned about having to pay so much more here, and everybody says, well, it's because you have a longer trip on the road or something, and that's more impact. But the fact of it is, out here where all these homes are and growing, there's more impact there than in a rural area, because you gotta have, 4 and 6 lane roads to support all these homes in that area. Now, they get more because there's more numbers, but it seems like it's harsh, and a lot of our citizens have been arguing and fussing about the high mobility impact fee that we're having to
So
charge.
there's a change that we're going to talk about in a second in the rural area, that for large lots in the rural area, where we're going to reduce their fees.
Okay, and that's what
So we're about to
Go
cover
back to the
that.
warehouse for a second.
Okay, well, let me answer his question first, okay? But to smooth out all of the fees, other than the large lots in the rural area, I'd have to increase the fees in the urban area to do that.
I understand.
And I had very specific board direction at the last workshop to not increase any fees. And so I can't smooth them out unless you give me authority to raise their urban fees.
Right.
And I just want to say, we don't what we're doing is incentivizing growth where it costs less to deliver services. If you want to look at what we're doing in our county as a macro statement, right?
Well, it's also where we have transit plan and increase
Right.
the mobility fees. So we've intentionally, besides the trip length issue, it's an area, the urban areas, if you look at that map of the urban area, it's all areas where we have local and regional transit plan for the future.
Right.
So there's another mode for people, if there's congestion that occurs in that area, there's another mode that's available to them. The rural area generally does not have any transit available, even in future.
Yeah.
And because you're driving longer distances, you want a better quality of service.
Yeah.
You don't want
Okay, so
the
what, I'm
congestion.
sorry, what was the question about warehouse?
Well, explain active passive warehouse for us.
Oh, that's, okay, so active passive warehouse, one of the references we go to is Trip Generation, a compilation of traffic generation studies, which is produced by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. A new edition was released last year. They redefined how they look at warehouses. And so we've adjusted your fee schedule to reflect the newer classification. One is a higher trip generation, traffic generating type of warehouse. It's your parcel fulfillment center, your distribution centers, they're more active. Some warehouses are more passive, you just store stuff there.
What do you consider a self-storage facility?
Self-storage is a mini warehouse.
Okay.
It's not in that.
It's neither.
Thank you.
It's put into retail. It's actually, mini, self-storage is put into retail.
You can double their fees if you want to.
Their fees are not going down. Okay,
Yeah, you can triple those.
Especially if they're on the
We have
54
enough mini
corridor.
storage warehouses.
If they face 54 there.
In multifamily, you can triple those.
There's legal limits of what I can do. But certainly, there's no reduction in their fees.
Are we supposed to be able to read that?
Yeah, but even though we
Right, that
introduced
way.
those two land uses as separate land uses in the fee schedule, you're incentivizing all your industrial uses anyway, so they just all.
No, and I get it. I think we just wanted a clarification on what you have, what wasn't.
So, Commissioner Moore, on that point, mini warehouse used to be in the industrial category. In 2014, we moved it into retail, commercial, because it wasn't really functioning as a office or industrial use.
You're right.
So it now pays a fee. Maybe not as high as you would like, but it certainly pays
Well,
a fee.
I guess that, since we're on warehouses, okay, what's the fee they pay now?
If it's a regular warehouse,
Mini storage.
not mini storage, oh, you want mini
Or
storage?
storage.
Okay, well,
They're all considered, I guess, mini storage.
okay, there's a difference between mini storage, which is typically where people put stuff they can't fit in their garage.
Correct, that's what I'm,
Okay.
yes, that's.
That they should be thrown away.
Okay, so we'll find out what that fee is.
Yeah, okay, so mini warehouse in the standard urban district is about $411 per 1,000 square feet. And general,
I need a magnifying glass. I cannot read that. Agree.
So that's your classification of a mini storage?
Has a light on it.
That's,
Yeah.
they're under that classification.
Yeah, if they're a storage facility that's primarily taking residential goods for
Yes.
storage, that's mini warehouse.
Right.
They
That's-
pay the $411 per 1,000 square feet.
Okay. So give,
But if
so I
it's
don't
a-
have to-
but
so I don't
if
have
it's
to get my
like-
magnifying glass out.
But if you had a distribution center like an Amazon,
No,
that
we're
store a
good.
bunch
No.
of goods,
No, we
they
don't.
pay zero.
Yeah, I understand, that makes sense, that's a job creator.
Okay.
So back to the, okay, 411 per 1,000, so let's compare that to, just give me, a fast food restaurant. What's a fast food restaurant pay?
It's gonna be a lot higher.
Yes.
I know, but I'm
Fast
just
food
curious how much.
restaurant, urban district, it's like 41,000 per 1,000 square feet.
And the reason for that is because mini warehouses, as much as I know you don't like them, they don't generate,
I don't dislike, we're becoming oversaturated in this market with them.
they don't generate a lot of trips. I mean, the average residential use only visits is probably once a month. I mean, they're not generating a lot of vehicle trips.
And I can appreciate that, but you're also bringing in, higher weight vehicles on it, typically too, so trucks and, you know, U-Hauls and,
Yes, sir.
take that into consideration.
It's still a trip though.
Oh, it's a trip, it's a heavier trip. I'm looking for a way to de-incentivize them to
I know it.
put
We
in
all know
more
what to
Well,
on
do.
the 54, 56
Okay,
corridor.
so,
We just forbid it.
so there
but-
was, okay, when the original version of the fee schedule had their fees being reduced, I said, Bill, that will not be acceptable to the board. So we made it clear that their fees are not going down from what we adopted in 2014. I can't think of a good way to increase their fees, that
No.
just because they don't generate enough trips.
Taking up
Let's
our
build you
office
can
and
take
industrial space,
Get rid of.
that's a good reason.
You're still paying a 19%.
I guess they could remove their
urban
incentive
district.
entirely, which would increase their fees.
About 20%.
So
Okay, so what type of incentive do they have?
They're getting, in the urban district, they're getting about a 19%.
Oh, no, they don't need to
deduction.
be incentivized anymore, we're
So-
oversaturated already. Why incentivize something we don't need more of?
So we can remove that incentive.
Please do.
Yes, please.
But I want to be clear,
If you go
the reason we
500.
didn't is because we had prior board direction to not raise any fees.
Okay, but you're not raising the fee, you're de-incentivizing the fee.
That will cause their fee to go up. I want to be clear.
And I understand your premise, but we are not raising their fee, we're
Well,
taking away the incentive.
let me say where I am.
I understand.
Let me say where I
You're working two different ways here.
agree with Commissioner Moore, just with some clarification.
No, you're not.
I would take it away if it's front State Road 54. If it's on a side road or back
56.
off the main,
I don't know if you
the
can-
main
That's a
road.
market area, and then he was, yeah, I don't
That's
think.
going to be, well, I guess we could take away the incentive just in the urban area. So, but,
Okay,
so that means you don't want it taken away in the suburban or rural area?
No, where I object is that we have a storage facility facing State Road 54, 56, which brings no jobs. To me, a storage facility is a destination, and it should be on a back road, and we should leave those.
That's a land use
that- yeah.
regulation, that's not
Yeah,
a, that's not a
I
fee
can't-
issue.
I can't deal with that as a mobility fee issue. That's a zoning issue.
Who's-
I
yes.
mean,
You.
you all have the ability to change your zoning
Well, I wanna
code
do
as
that.
to where those are allowed.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, we need to save that for something that
The only
has
thing we can do
jobs.
today is if you want us to remove the incentive for mini storage, we absolutely can do that.
because we may find somebody, another area that would be more fitting for job creation
But-
to add that incentive.
But you just need to tell us whether you want it removed in urban, suburban, and rural, or just urban. I mean, tell us what you,
I'm good with doing it across the board, but I'll leave it up to everybody else too.
I think I'm more interested in the land use than the mobility fee.
Well, this is,
Land use corrections.
okay, so about,
Because if a mini warehouse comes in and it says, sure, I'll pay $500 a square for 1,000 square feet, he's still on.
They're still
54.
coming.
Yeah.
and
I'd rather
no
prohibit that
fee we charge,
in
even
certain
if
but we
areas.
can,
all subsidy, it's not gonna stop you from getting mini warehouses on 54.
yeah, you can
We'll just pay
take away the
fee.
incentives now, and that's,
I agree with him, they're
might-
gonna, that's not gonna ding them. That's not gonna
It's
stop
not a
it.
job creator.
Singling out.
it's not a job creator, yeah, it's not a job creator, so why, Commissioner Marriott said it, we're
True.
incentivizing a non-really
We'll do
job
both.
creator.
Okay, so all we can do today is remove their incentive
Thank you.
in all
Yes.
marketers.
Everybody
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, it's not a job creator.
Okay, so we got that directed, got that bill? Okay.
Frankly, I think that anything that's not a job creator shouldn't be incentivized.
Okay, well,
Sorry, that's why we're doing this. We are
okay,
incentivizing.
so.
Job
let me-
creation.
Let me handle this, okay? Okay, so there are incentives built throughout the fee schedule, even on things like residential and retail. The reason there was because the board back in 2011 wanted to keep the fees at a certain level.
I didn't mean that.
Okay, if you want me to remove the incentive for residential and retail,
No,
the fees are gonna go up.
no, I didn't mean that.
So anytime you remove an incentive, okay, well, that's what I thought you just said.
Well, what else would be similar to, if there is anything, the storage facility that takes up a lot of land, but doesn't really make any jobs?
Well,
Can anyone think of
Along-
anything?
a golf course, I mean, cemeteries, golf courses,
Cemeteries.
RV parks now, oh, really kind of good.
so,
But they're not along those major corridors, so
I mean, if you
Something
tell
to
us,
think about.
new ones are coming up.
if there's some other use in the fee schedule that you think should not be getting
I'm
any
going through it right
incentives,
now.
we're happy to remove their incentives. Just keep in mind their fee's gonna go up.
If you're taking their discount
We're
away.
taking their discount away. So I have clear direction on mini warehouse. If there's some other one, you need to tell me what it is.
I'm good with just,
I'm good with that one for
Maybe
now.
that's
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
I'm looking through the list.
we're just going crazy over there.
all right.
Okay.
No, it's nothing we should be promoting and going out and trying to encourage anyways, right?
All right, cool. So I think we got through this slide.
I would like to make movie theaters pay no mobility fees, especially in the Trinity area. At least for the next year. Then we can put it back.
You need a movie.
I think I know, okay, well, the one that you're talking about, I think I know what you're talking about.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
But that particular project is already getting TOD rates, which is like a 75% reduction.
Yes, they are.
So they're
Whatever it
virtually,
takes.
they're paying a quarter of what everybody else is paying.
Okay. That was totally for my own personal enjoyment.
Okay, let's move on.
Right. So the land uses that did end up with reduced fees are those land uses where we had to, based on technical merits. And this is, it's kind of complicated to explain, but between the tax increment, the increased tax increment credit, self-credit, and between changes to the trip generation rates based from the new ITE trip generation manual, we basically had to reduce the rate because these land uses now are essentially getting no incentives. So there are a few land uses where we ran out of incentive money, if you will, to absorb other changes. It's kind of complicated, but it's the way the math works out. High-rise condominiums, age-restricted multifamily, congregate care, trip rate reduction. The ones, churches, down 12% in terms of
So Bill,
trip
let me try to
generation
elaborate
rates.
on the top three. The top three are all uses that they create very high property values, high-rise condominiums, age-restricted multifamily, but they generate
Few trips.
very few trips. So for that reason, their fees really hadn't come down.
No, I think we should be encouraged age-restricted multifamily and congregate care facilities.
Well, you are,
Yeah.
you're gonna reducing their fees.
Yes, I mean, that's good.
How about the hardware paint
We know how you
store?
feel about the.
Yeah, the hardware, this is your
This is
freestanding,
good.
true value hardware store.
It's good.
87%.
Phenomenal decline in trip generation rate. And I think that's probably the big boxes are,
Is that, so that'd be Lowe's and Home Depot and?
no,
No.
this is your.
Ace?
Lowe's and Home Depot is under a different, this is your.
This is not Ace.
True Value,
Or Sherman
your
Williams.
family hardware store.
Sherman-Williams Paint Store,
Yeah, they don't drive an art.
right,
Yeah.
that's.
And I think the big boxes are taking a lot of their business away. So that was the big surprise to me as I went through
But I
it.
think it's good, support small business.
Ace Hardware would fit in that.
Yes.
So,
So there were a few amongst the,
Do you have, one for produce market?
not a fee category specifically for produce market. We have, the supermarket or grocery store is the closest where that comes to that.
Not the same as the grocery store. Grocery store has all kinds of products.
I think we need to raise the fees on those.
only on Starkey Boulevard.
But I'm looking through here and I don't see, yeah, it's ag
Oh, so you're-
now, but if it ever changes, I'm just curious.
Well, most produce stands probably aren't paying a fee at all. I mean, they're not. A produce stand is generally considered a temporary use,
Yeah.
and it would never pay an impact fee.
What,
Well, they got a fixed building now.
yeah, what's the difference between a stand and a
It's not one that's gonna
market?
leave.
I mean, what makes, wait,
The
I think yours
permanency
would
of
be
the
a stand,
use.
I would think.
well, we're a stand. We're the produce market stand.
Some produce markets are more mobile, they can pick up and move to another
We
location.
probably need to
anytime.
discuss that.
Yours
use
is a
offline,
building.
'cause I need more facts.
Okay. I've just been looking through here and I see nothing in that kind of small specialty category.
But there is one called specialty retail, that we
Yeah, but I-
discussed, but I'm not even sure it's gonna pay a fee at all. We need to talk about the details of the
Okay.
use, so.
This print is really, really small, I just want to say.
On the fee schedules, I understand. Sorry.
I printed mine at 11 by 7. It's here. All right. And y'all did express an interest in further providing additional incentives in your west market area. And so, as Dave explained earlier, in 2014, you set the fees for any redevelopment to $0. So that is continued into this fee schedule.
All right, right here.
And we have also added an incentive to the infill development category as well. So the redevelopment is where you tore something down and rebuilt the site. The infill program is if you have a vacant piece of property in this district, it's provided a 75% reduction from the standard fee.
Okay, so when we say vacant, does that mean a building that's closed up, or does that mean a property that's never been
Just
developed,
never
or
been
a property
developed.
where
Never
the
been
building's
developed.
condemned?
Never been
Bare
developed.
lands.
If it had prior development on it, it's gonna be redeveloped. And we're gonna get to, as long as there was at least 25%, we changed the code, but as long as at least 25% of that lot was covered by a building or parking lot or something, it's gonna qualify as redevelopment.
And that lot would also, you'd recognize the prior use, the equivalent fee value from the prior use.
So
as
you get
already
that,
having been
that'll
paid.
give you a credit for that prior use?
There's no-
Yes.
Okay.
There's no
Same as with a home, if you had an old home
Very
that
honest.
you tore down and rebuilt a structure, say the same square footage as before, you actually have a credit fee.
So, but to be clear, redevelopment is already zero, okay? That occurred in 2014. What proposing to be added is the vacant lot where there was no prior development on it. We're proposing, the committee's recommending a 75% reduction for those lots if they're in this mapped yellow area that you see up there.
Okay, and have you identified those land parcels? Because I'd love to see what that looks like.
Terry, do you have the map?
I don't have the map with me, but we have that
I
information.
think we'd all love to see that, right?
Okay.
So,
At least the three of
I will
us.
tell you, this is the issue, and Pat can probably agree with me, that had the most discussion at the committee level, okay, about where to draw that line as far as infill, and then how much of reduction to give these infill parcels. So, There was one committee member that thought it should be a 50% reduction for infill, but the majority of the committee thought it should be 75%. The committee was pretty unanimous, though, on the boundaries. The boundaries you see up there in yellow, it's not the entire West Market area. It's basically, if you take Rowan Road and you go west, and then you take everything west of 19, and then some additional nodes that were identified as part of the Harvest Plan, that's that entire yellow area. So the committee felt that that area was the area that most in need of incentives for vacant infill parcels.
And what we're talking about here are only mobility fees, or we're
This
talking?
is only mobility fees.
So David, just where it's regular aerial, that hard line is Rowan and Seven Springs down to the county line?
Yes.
And then where Rowan ends to the north, it's
19.
19.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know Commissioner Wells can't see those colors.
Oh.
But generally, it's everything west of 19 and everything west of Rowan. And the committee had pretty good consensus on that boundary,
Okay.
as that being the area most in need of additional incentives for vacant land.
And in other workshops, I'd like to discuss other discounts, especially on the 19, facing 19
So we could do that, but
redevelopment.
today we're just mobility
Right,
fees,
right.
and the reason the
My
committee did
commissioner's
not, the reason the committee did not want to make it 0 for infill is because they didn't want it to be the same as redevelopment. They felt that redevelopment should have a bigger incentive than infill development.
Okay.
It should.
Yeah, I'm with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, the second new incentive program that was introduced was what's called the Rural Large Lot Fee. And this basically is if you have a residential lot 5 acres or larger in the rural district, you would pay the same rate as the similarly sized home in the suburban area. So, as indicated there, if you're changing land use to smaller than 5 acre lots, you'll continue to pay the $9,800 fee for the 1,500 to 2,500 square foot building, house. And if you're on a larger lot, you'll pay $8,570.
So let me just add to this. The reason that I think staff supported this idea is that our vision for the rural area really is larger lots. And so we didn't think that a large lot in the rural area should be penalized for building on a large lot in the rural area.
Yeah.
Now, the issue of whether that large, there's two issues that got discussed, whether a large lot is considered 5 acres or 10 acres. There was 2 committee members that thought it should be 10 acres, but the majority of the committee thought 5 acres larger should be a rural lot. So that's why staff recommending 5 acres and larger. The other issue that was discussed was whether those homes should pay the suburban rate or the urban rate. The committee recommended the suburban rate, but there's such little development in the rural area that if the board wanted to make it the urban rate, we have enough funds to do that, but that's a policy decision. So, but I don't want you to think that there's a financial prohibition on you making those lots pay the urban rate, but the committee thought the suburban rate would be appropriate.
On the units, you're cutting the number at 24.99, we don't get any higher than that?
No. He's just showing you an example.
Just gonna-
But all size units in the rural area would get that benefit, as long as they're on a lot 5 acres or greater.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have a smaller home, the fee will be less than the $8,570. And if you have a bigger home, the fee will be more than
Which
the
is governed by
$8,570. But it'll be equal to the comparable
Same as
size
suburban.
home in the suburban district.
Yeah. I think that's fair in this area, so.
See, and I thought rural was 10 acres. I would have been on the 10 acre
So
side.
that was debated, and some of the rural advocates were at that meeting and advocated that it should be 10 acres.
Yeah.
But the majority of the committee thought 5 acres was sufficiently rural that it should get that incentive.
I'm good with that.
The reason I I actually told them also that I thought 5 acres should be the number. Most of those parcels out there that are 50, 70 acres, 100 acres in the rural area, just out from here, most of them cannot develop less than 5 acres. And that's why I determined that a 5 acre lot should get that.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's where we are on that. Okay, and here's the what I call the budget check, and this actually compares. This is the list of all the different incentive categories and programs that you have going on. This kind of summarizes how deep I'm learning how to use this new spotlight feature. The second column basically kind of summarizes to what extent the land uses are subsidized or incentivized. The 2014 column summarizes how many dollars were in the budget based on how much development we thought would occur in those various categories. In 2018, we've got we had 4 years, I think, or 6 years of experience under our belts. We found that certain categories of incentives are really not being used that much. The TOD land use was one in particular. And so the next column shows, so we basically revised and reduced some of the categories of incentives, or the quantity of land use that we thought we might need to incentivize. And because of the slower growth rates, less quantity of land use might need to be incentivized. On the other hand, with costs going up, there's an additional cost that needs to be incentivized. Whoops, that was not expected. Okay, here we go. So basically at the bottom, you can see, there we go. You can see the effect and the total budget that was required for incentives in 2014 was about $414 million. In 2018, that required incentive amount actually almost doubles, slightly more than doubles, but the amount of revenue, because of the stronger revenue forecast, you can see that we actually had about twice the money available based on the healthier economic forecast, and we're able to continue to maintain that level of subsidy. So slower growth rates, less quantity of incentives. The thing to file away is that maybe in the next fee update, we may have to come back and adjust some things. And perhaps since 2011, actually might have to go back and increase some fees because we can't continue to deliver the same quality of service and the same level of incentives without increasing revenues. Holding things steady since 2011 until for the next 5 years. Obviously things are starting to shift a little bit where we don't have as much latitude and flexibility.
But the good news about the way the mobility fee was set up is that as the economy starts to improve, our tax increment revenue generally improves as well. And so it sort of helps us offset the increased cost of construction of roads.
So it's just something to watch over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, and as we lean into the next update. This slide is a slide I think y'all have seen before. It's the National Survey of Citizens, what urban issues or what growth issues they're concerned about. I don't know, Dave, any particular thing?
So if you remember this, and I think Mark Bella showed you this slide about a month ago, it shows that the citizens generally think we're doing better as it relates to transit and bike ped, but we're not doing as well on roads. And they're actually saying that the ease of car travel in Pasco County is not as good as it used to be. So for that reason, we've actually assumed a better level of service, particularly in the urban area, in this update, because we heard this complaint. Some of the committee members raised this complaint about increasing congestion levels in the urban area. And so it effectively requires us to spend more to address that congestion level in the urban area. So we were trying to be responsive to the citizens' concerns. responsive to the committee's concerns. Our old fee 2011, 2014, we assumed a very heavy level of congestion in the urban area. We're thinking the citizens are not going to be happy with that, and so we've changed the fee to not allow as much congestion in the urban area.
And that was a concern that was raised by the steering committee as well.
Committee?
Yes. So, yeah, thank you. All right, okay, so that's kind of the technical aspects of the mobility fee schedules themselves. There are other changes that are coming around with the adoption of this program, which y'all will be doing over the next couple of months. First of all, we've been doing this update study every 3 years, but your MPO long-range transportation plan is on a 5-year cycle. This study really addresses the financial aspects of that transportation plan update. So, and that plan is updated every 5 years. So the recommendation is, things don't change a whole lot over 2 or 3 years. Let's extend this out and do the next update in 5 years rather than 3 to coordinate with that plan schedule.
I can probably handle the next one.
Okay.
So partly as a result of the fact that we're not going to be updating as often, we charge a fee, what's called an administration fee with a mobility fee, that basically pays for our cost of implementing this program, paying bill, dealing with the subsidy calculations for mobility fees. Because we're going to be updating less often, that fee is actually going to go down. It's currently $392 per permit. Dan Rizzola and OMB did a study where he looks at our actual cost of the employees who have to administer mobility fees, and looked at the cost of doing the update, and ultimately concluded that because we're going to be updating less often, because we have more permits, that fee is actually going to go down. So everybody in the county is going to actually see a small reduction in their administration fee. So we'll be able to say that you effectively are reducing mobility fees for everybody. We also made it easier to qualify for the redevelopment exemption in the West Market area. That's the one we adopted in 2014. The old rule required you to have 50% lot coverage to qualify for it, but we discovered there's some residential uses that couldn't qualify under that rule, so we changed it to a 25% lot coverage, which we think now almost everybody's going to qualify for the redevelopment exemption unless it's truly a vacant lot. We also removed out any opt-out language. When we originally adopted mobility fees in 2011, we gave people the ability to opt out, but that opt-out period expired in 2016, so we've never removed any language relating to the opt-out. And so, next slide, Bill. As we mentioned earlier, the committee recommended unanimously, and Patty, you can weigh in if I say any of this wrong, all of the changes that we just talked about, except there were 2 members who wanted it to be 10-acre size for the rural lots, and then there was 1 member who preferred only a 50% reduction for the West Market infill lots. Other than that, the committee was pretty unanimous about all the other changes we talked about. Our next step would be to take this to the LPA, which is the Planning Commission, on October 25th, and then it requires 2 board hearings in November and December. And then we're proposing an effective date of January 1, 2019 for these changes.
I had one topic I did want to bring up, something I had mentioned before, and just see where the board is on this. Originally, hotels were not included in the incentive program, and then we added them in. And I think we've been very successful in getting a bunch of hotels being built. But I'm not sure we need to subsidize hotels anymore. I think it's a very, very healthy business. They're running at 90% occupancy, and I just wondered what others thought about incentivizing hotels. Because originally they weren't in there, right?
What's the incentive for hotels now?
They're paying 0. It's the same as
Yeah.
all the industrial.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of feel that I don't know that we need to incentivize them. They're building them like hotcakes. They're flipping them because they're making so much money on them, and I think they're going to come anyway because that market is so strong. So I don't think we need to be at 0.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner.
So, I know we have quite a few online right now
Yeah.
that are coming.
So they'd be grandfathered.
But At the same time, I think that discussion would also want to involve tourism, in my opinion, to make sure we have product, because we didn't have product before. So whether people were coming for, let's just bring the hockey rink into play, for example. Now, yes, we have more hotels now, more people are able to stay in Pasco County, but before, the majority of people, whether it be the Dixon Cross Tournament, whatever, they were staying outside the county. So that doesn't benefit us at all. So you think about hotels, one of the things they do, besides bringing in just TDT dollars, they're bringing in, obviously revenues for our small businesses. So whether it be our local restaurants or retail establishments, if they're buying gas, they're going to buy it here. If they're staying somewhere else and just driving in for the day, more likely they're going to be doing that in Hillsborough County, Pinellas County. So I understand what you're saying. My fear
I still think they should be at zero.
Well, I guess my fear is, do we have enough product yet? Because you look at what's coming too, with the Wiregrass Sports Complex, some things we're doing county-wide. There's some other things online that may happen in the future. So I think really tourism should be involved in that conversation and say, how much product do we need to, in Pasco County before we take that away?
Let me ask,
There'll be a
how
time
many are in the
there'll be at that
pipeline?
time. I don't know if that time is right just yet, though.
Don't we have like 9 hotels or so in the pipeline that would be exempt from zero?
We're still low on
I
product
could
compared to
check.
our surrounding counties.
I could check, I don't know off the top of my head. I
The
can
other-
check really quick.
The other thing I would add is that hotels do function as a support use for office and industrial. I mean, example, I give this Trusin and Medler Toledo, they wanted those hotels there because they bring in people from all over the country, their customers, to stay in those hotels. And so sort of function as an ancillary or support use for the office and industrial uses.
And we still need more conference space too.
I understand all of that.
We're still short on conference
I think
space.
I think the hotels are very healthy. They're doing great in Pasco County, running 95% occupancy. Do they really need an incentive to come here at zero? I'm not saying give them let's go back to 100%, but do we need to keep them at zero? Mindful that we need to have good roads for those people to drive on, and that's what this money goes to. So that's all. I just wanted to throw it out there for discussion.
I would just add that, in my opinion, I think if you're going to remove incentives for something, I'd rather see you remove them from residential and retail than before you remove them from hotel.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
All right. You
Chairman?
can
We talked a long time about the Dick's Sporting Events and the numbers for tourism people that were staying in Tampa. And we wanted to do something years ago to try to change that then, and that's why we got it down to zero. I'm glad to see we're moving that way. We got so many coming and they're making money. That's great. I want to see that thing keep rolling. This is going to go on for 5 more years before we bring it back. I would love to take another look at it then.
Okay.
But I mean, for right now, let's keep this momentum going. Let them keep on coming. Let them keep on building, and let them know that we're supporting every step of the way. Because all the extra benefits for the hotel is not just the hotel, but all that it does for the
A
area.
lot of other services.
You even have one coming up.
I was actually
19
looking.
coming up.
I think
which
they'd
is
still
good.
come if we charged them 20%. I
Again,
don't
just
think it would slow it down
I
one
think
bit.
have that, to
That's all.
really do some due diligence. I understand what you're saying, do some due diligence on it. Again, involve tourism, in that tourism team and let them help.
Commissioner Mariano says that's cool.
Because they weren't originally at zero, but we moved them to zero to get some more going up, which I think we achieved what we really wanted. And I do believe there's like 9 in the pipeline.
If I could, right now, we don't have a zero incentive on the rural and suburban area though, right? Or
No,
do we?
it's zero.
It's zero everywhere?
In 2014, we changed it so hotel is zero.
Is it zero?
countywide.
Okay, I would make sure of that, okay. 'Cause I would.
Yeah.
Same with office and industrial. Those 3 uses, office, industrial, and hotel, are zero
It
countywide.
was originally just office and industrial before you
I
guys.
think that's good for
It
now.
is.
Looking at it in 4 or
Absolutely.
5 years would be a great thing. It'll change, and we're trying our best to be a premier county, and we're getting there. But don't put the brakes on us before we get there. We're still not there yet, but we gotta grow. Commissioner Moore.
I got something we can put the brakes on.
Besides mini stores,
Yeah, multi.
So let's talk
apartments.
multifamily a little bit while we're here. I could appreciate the age-restricted multifamily. There's a need for that. There's a need for affordable housing in certain areas of the county. And I think we all agree to that. And I know there's some programs out there, and we're probably going to see more of that coming. Let's talk about what your typical non-age restricted, non-affordable housing type of apartment complex is paying?
Bill, what
And do
is
we feel
rate
that's,
versus regular
do we as a
multifamily?
board, as a whole, feel that is
Regular apartment.
sufficient?
Regular apartment is, multifamily apartments in the urban district, $39.71 per unit.
How much of an incentive did they get?
Only 7% for the urban district.
Okay, 7% urban, okay.
Let's see, this is TMD, urban, suburban. Multifamily, 17%
Where, 17, where?
in the suburban district.
Okay.
Rural standard,
Probably not gonna get much more multifamily in the rural area, but.
28% in the rural district.
No, I wouldn't think so.
So,
It's coming though there.
so if the board wanted to remove the incentive for multifamily, that's an option.
I'm game, I'm in,
I don't really want to.
I'm in.
It's
I
for
just
the
wanna
same
be
reason
clear.
that the hotels,
I'm gonna be clear though, the reason we didn't is because we were under prior board direction to not increase any fees. So if you remove that incentive, their fees will go up.
I'm hoping to
Taking away
see
the
a lot.
incentives that they are getting that they previously didn't have.
The reason why I'm not for that at this time is I'm hoping that properties along 19 and some other areas that will see some increased
So,
affordable housing, which would be multifamily or apartment complexes. For example, the one that's coming in Gulf Harbors, I'm so glad, at the mall, I'm so glad they're coming. And I would like to see us replace some of the old age stock on the west side with some new updated housing like this.
but it's carved out for the
Yeah, West
redevelopment and
Market's-
infill.
West Market
on West Market.
redevelopment and infill is gonna get.
Yeah, but I could see that need in other areas too. I don't think you're gonna see, we have these big developments coming through and all of them have a piece of this, of these apartments that we're seeing along 54. But I think the ones that, at least in our area, in the 54 corridor, and I don't think you're gonna see many more because I think all the ones, in our area, the land's gone.
Look at the pre-apps that are already in
The ones
with
that
staff.
are in pre-app, they're gonna get it already, they're grandfathered. So
No,
maybe you're talking about.
That's not true. You wouldn't be grandfathered until
get a
you
building
got to a
permit.
building permit.
Right.
Well,
You don't-
yeah, I
you
wouldn't
don't-
wanna pull the
you
rug
pay that when
out
you pay your
from under
CO.
I just
You're not-
think,
To be
we're-
clear, we don't tell them what their fee is until they get a building permit.
all right, but
And that's part of.
I
the
read that
CO.
our apartments,
You can't get their CO.
and I agree, there's
Get the fee.
a lot of them going up. But I read that those places are at 96% occupancy. That means they are satisfying a huge need that's out there in the community.
So I'll refer back to the study that I shared with everybody, done by Raymond James, that disagrees with that statement. Please, if you still have it, read through it. It's pretty thorough.
That says they're not at 96, what,
Well, just
disagrees
I-
with what?
disagrees with the statement. I mean, they feel the market's oversaturated and it's going to have a negative impact in the very near future on us. So you think of it, let's talk about this for a second. Let's get into the weeds then. So, yes, there is a need, but I think we've seen that need filled in a large majority of our county already. Yes, there's opportunities in the West Market area, and I totally agree where where the Coffee Square Mall was. That's a perfect location. There's some areas, there's more areas on the west side that I think would benefit from a nice apartment complex, especially in some of the areas where there needs to be more affordable housing to get people out of rundown trailer parks. Mobile home parks and things like that, i.e. Leisure Lane and things like that. This is an opportunity for them to go into that. But how oversaturated we are along that 54, 56 corridor. When you have 5, 10 years from now, who knows what the cycle's going to, how long the cycle's going to last, what the market's going to do. And you start having empty apartments, and it's very difficult for those owners to afford the upkeep on them. And you can look at different parts of the state. Look at Brandon, for example. What's happening in those areas there at Brandon? Someone's apartment complex. They come run down, and but I'll give you. What about when you put? Again, what happens when you put up a 500-unit apartment complex? And it's almost instantly that the impact is almost instant on our schools, for example, too. Talk about overcrowding of our schools. Bam. It's not, you don't ease into it. It's like instant. You know, talking about, sorry, my phone is blowing up for some reason. Obviously, we talk about
I'm a developer.
yeah. Hey, listen, I haven't been shy about this. I haven't been shy about this having this conversation. And people know where I stand on it, so it's no secret that my frustration that on every corner in every street now we're putting up apartment complexes. So we talk. Well, I'm gonna keep going for a minute here. So we're talking about taking away. Commissioner Stark, for example, yourself, and you say it nicely when you bring this up. The taking away some of the land on the 54, say 56 corridor that you think should be job creators. Well, what's going up there? Apartment complex, apartment complex, apartment complex. Where goes your land for these office complexes, this A-class office space, for these job creators? Then it's gone, and they're eating it up. There's another one that just, if you leave today, well, you probably won't go that way, but next time you drive down 54 in the Leno Lakes area, right, when you get over the overpass, you'll see a new grand complex going up. I mean, it was just announced that there's a pre-app for one just down the street from there. Do we really need one another block away?
I think they do market studies and they wouldn't be building
Well,
them if there wasn't a need in the.
It's hot right now, sure. It's hot. It's hot for them right now. But again, 5 years down the road, look at the study again. I'm not gonna, it's thick. I can't go over with you word for word right now, but.
I think it's a topic that warrants a lot more discussion from our planners to understand the impacts of when you start denying
You're not denying
kind
it.
of
You're not denying
homes in areas. So
not denying it.
Yeah, to be clear, even if you remove that incentive, it's not going to cause you to necessarily stop having these multifamily apartments. It's just going to raise their fees is what it's going to do.
Right.
well, that it doesn't affect.
So what
You said it at hotels.
That's the opposite of what I just said about hotels.
Yeah, you said it wouldn't affect hotels. So if you
can't.
don't think it's going to affect apartments, then what's the big deal? Get more money in our coffers for the impacts that they're having on our area.
I don't think it would stop those huge ones,
Well, then if it doesn't
but
stop
it might
then-
stop the smaller infill ones, which I think we would want.
Well, those you have the incentives on the west side of the county for those. They're already built in. We just talked about that.
I just think it warrants a more in-depth discussion with.
Bill, do you have
Our
an
planning
estimate how much
department.
would raise the fee in the urban area if you remove that incentive?
About 1,500?
Dollar wise, see, it's at 39.71, bump that up by 7, or divide that by 0.93, increase it by 7%.
Well, what's the fee before buy down?
Oh, before by now, yeah, sure it is. 42.64. Yeah, go from 39.71 to 42.64, $250 per apartment.
That's
If you
all
take
right.
the fee away and add 250,
You take away the incentive.
Incentive.
that's what I mean.
It's a
I'm
$300
not-
incentive.
Commissioner
That's for
Brown.
urban. It would be more in
That's hitting the
suburban and rural.
low-income people.
We just see. You're going back to that. We just said where they needed to be. They're going to have the incentives for them.
Commissioner Mariano.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if I had to push them, I'd want to push them a 19 corridor. All the services there, everything's in place.
Yeah, and that's
$300 a unit. Again, if that 54 corridor is better served with higher-end residential, hotel, office complex,
Industrial.
that's where they want to go. And I'll tell you, if it is up in the corridor, they're going to be welcome up there. that whole 19 car that we just like put up for 75%.
There's not as much product there. You need product there.
We need people. We're at,
Yeah.
schools are at 70%.
You need the product, and if you
Yeah.
can shift them people that
I'm
way.
actually okay with doing that, now that
Well,
we've decided it.
we just approved that apartment complex right there next to the Hudson Elementary School
Yeah.
last meeting, which is good. You know, I mean, it's up to the board. I don't think we need to decide this today. The market decides. I mean, the market's gonna decide how much these we need. These aren't Section 8, these aren't even affordable. These are.
We said we need
these are-
affordable though.
I
by
know, we
19
need, and
corridor.
we're doing it. We're doing it in the
Yeah.
West Market area. We just saw the first one come in, 3-story. It's gonna be a nice project. It is nice to see that in Hudson, you know, because we do need it, but it shows the millennials, that's really what they want, is apartment complexes where they don't have to worry about anything. It's, again, we don't make the market. I fear if we start doing things like this, then where does it stop? It's not really up to us. I think it's up to the market. That's just my opinion.
Well, again, then why do we need to incentivize them? There's the question. Why do we need to
We could go through the
incentivize
whole
them?
list and probably.
But it's really,
And maybe we
it's really
should.
not that much of an incentive if you take away.
That's why do you need to
No, no,
incentivize? If the
$250
market's gonna
is
dictate, why do you need to
very big.
incentivize it?
It's much bigger in the suburban and rural area though. It's $1,200 and it would be a $1,200 increase in the
Increase in
suburban,
the fee,
in the suburban.
Per unit.
Per
and
unit.
that's a per unit, right?
Yep. We're lowering age-restricted multifamily. That's something we need. That's a product we need.
Absolutely, I agree.
We need that. We need that bad in Pasco County right now. If you look at the one in Zephyr Hills, there's a waiting list, for a year probably. You can't even get in there. People I talk to, I've encouraged them, build age-restricted multifamily. We need more of that for our seniors that are low income to have a place where they can live and that everything's taken care of. That's needed, okay? Again, some of the affordable housing in the certain areas that it's needed now. I agree 1,000% with that. We don't need any more high-end apartment complexes on 54 and 56 in that corridor.
I agree, and again,
So why are we gonna incentivize it?
Mr. Chairman, so I think leaving the suburban, leaving the rural as they are, leave the West Market area the way it is, and just focus on the rest of that corridor. It's just a small little piece, and it's only $300 a unit anyway. So it's not gonna really affect someone's decision or not, but it might give us a little bit more money when we need to build an overpass somewhere.
Exactly. We can, because the impact, the severe impact they have on the roads, put some more money into that.
Two things. One, I think, again, that we need to maybe workshop this with input from our planning department to understand social impacts. And two, I'd like to hear from the impact fee, the mobility fee committee, what you think, what are your thoughts on what's being proposed here?
These are $20,000, $2,500 a month
No,
apartments.
I want to hear from our
These aren't
expert
low
panel.
incomes we're talking.
Our expert panel, represented by one guy.
Poor Pat.
Thanks for the invitation to come, by the way. Let's see, when it comes to multifamily, I think there's some land use issues that you have the ability to affect outside what we're discussing today. Although I do agree that price is a discriminant that the market clearly understands. So if you take away an incentive, said differently, provide a disincentive to a market, it will respond to it. I think the magnitude of the incentive for multifamily in the urban service area is small enough where it is inconsequential. To the high end, multifamily.
Right.
And so you're effectively removing any possibility of an incentive for workforce multifamily in the urban service area. The nature of not wanting to have a particular land use anywhere in your county is likely far more effectively administered in your land use decisions, not in your mobility fee decisions. So I think regardless of what your choice is here, you're far more effective in administering that choice in your normal land use and zoning choices that are in your complete control every day. When it comes to the ability to provide the incentives for workforce multifamily along 19, you've done a marvelous job in doing that. So I think those things are absolutely true. What exactly the full, full reaction would be from the mobility fee committee would take asking the entire committee. This is my opinion. You know, although, you know, we do a little bit of work in this county, so the reaction that our clientele would have, likely the majority of the applications that you're seeing in the urban service area are not workforce. And consequently, the low level of incentive wouldn't be a decision maker. The cost of the land is the big decision maker in those areas.
Mr. Chairman?
Just to follow up.
Mr. Moore, go ahead.
Thanks. And I appreciate that, Pat. I've had a number of people in business, a small business in my area, that expresses their frustration with the amount of apartment complexes that are being built in, quote, my district. And I think they're going to be very vocal in the very near future.
Is it because they don't want lower income people?
You keep going back to that. You keep going back to that when I said that we need more affordable housing. You're talking about. I'm talking about the high-end apartment complex. Just get away from that. Okay, we're not talking about that. We need to locate those in the areas that are needed, along with, I said, the age-restricted multifamily. That's not the issue we're talking about. We're talking about taking up valuable land, frontage on areas like 54, 56, that could be job creators, and they're getting filled with apartment complex after apartment complex and storage facility after storage facility. It's getting crazy. I'm just being honest. So that's what's going on. People are frustrated. They've had enough of it. And it goes back again to what I talked about with your instant increase in, you know, almost a major hit on population in the schools and the roads too. But I hear it all the time, constantly. And I don't disagree. I mean, and I don't disagree with them one bit. So again, yeah, I told you where the opportunity. We need the more affordable housing, and I'm sure there's going to be. I don't see anybody here, but you'll see some of those things come up in the very near future that we're probably have to make some choices on because there's only so much money out there. And again, we need them. We need the age-restricted ones. Those are things we need. But again, bam, every day there's a new one.
Please, no.
Mr. Chairman?
You're gonna have to just be more vocal.
Sure, go ahead. I know they're going to answer
All
my
right, so,
question.
I mean, I want to say, I think the committee and staff did a great job dissecting this all the way through. I wanted to make sure we did something in the West Market. I thought we did some good things the previous time, but I think this extra step is huge. I don't think the incentive on the apartments at 7%, $300 a unit is going to affect anything. It would give us a little bit more money. As again, Mr. Gasway says, it's not a decision maker. I don't want to delay this going out back to the committee, coming back again. I think it's a very small, inconsequential number that's as far as the effect goes, but it could give us a little bit more revenue. I'm comfortable with staff bringing this back to us. If you want to give us the number so we can make an up and down vote on that day, we're going to hear it on the hearing days. I'm okay to either make it agenda recommendation number 1 and 1A or 1 and 2, whatever it was. Let us make that call and just leave everything else the same. I'm good with doing it that way. I don't want to stretch this out any further.
No, I agree. I don't have some great people that'll probably come and speak that day too on the same issue.
And I will say, I'm supporting Commissioner Moore's position. If it means that we leave the West Market alone, leave the suburban, the rural alone, and just go with that urban corridor that's left, I'm good with that.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that we have a separate rate for low-income multifamily. So there's a way to increase regular apartments without increasing low-income apartments.
Yep.
So the urban core goes up 41, correct?
Pardon me?
The urban core goes up 41?
It's all the area in purple is urban.
So just understand what you're saying there.
It doesn't go all the way.
We're not affected the low-income possible apartments.
It's not all the way, it's the southern part of 41, but it doesn't go all the way to 41.
Right. But like you said, I agree with Commissioner Mariano. We'll bring it back and have that discussion the day we vote during the public hearing.
But what I'm hearing is those that are in favor of removing that incentive, it's only in the urban area.
Correct.
Okay.
Terry, you had something to say?
I was just gonna, it sounded to me like there was a geographic issue where there's multifamily being proposed in certain areas. And I would agree with Pat that the best way to deal with that is through a land use and zoning regulation versus the mobility fee. But there is the low income multifamily fee schedules that we can weigh as well. But I just want to caution that you really can't distinguish between different types of multifamily when you're talking zoning and land use. We can do that with fees and whatnot, but from a land use perspective, you're talking about rezoning properties if you don't want them in certain geographies of the county.
So again, it can't just be the urban, you're gonna have to include some of that suburban though too, because if you look at that 54, 56, where it is, a lot of that's in the suburban area.
Okay, so,
So you gotta look at suburban and,
well, most of the 54, 56 corridors in the urban area, I don't know of any, I know we don't have roads on there, but as far as I know, the entire, that's all the way over to 301.
Yeah, that southeast corner, that bottom,
Right down there.
that's 301.
That's US 301.
isn't there a portion of 50, will it be a portion of 52 on the way to Zephyr Hills in that?
No.
No, that kind
Up
of,
on
on the edge.
52,
Right in there. And right in there.
Shady Hills?
Oops.
So I'm sorry, what was the question?
Where the 56 corridor,
54, 52, yeah.
54, 56 is the suburban to the north. It kind of looks like the dividing line going
52.
north-south or east-west is
Yeah.
54, 56, isn't it?
Okay, 54, 56 is, I believe, all entirely within that purple area.
It is.
The end of it on the right, is that 301 or 301?
That's 301.
This is
Okay.
All the way over.
Okay,
Which is right now our limits of where 56 ends.
yeah, that's correct.
What about where 54 ends or goes into Zephyr Hills?
So that's in the suburban.
That's,
Right, that corner right there.
So it is in the suburban area.
Yeah.
So we're 54,
I think
So
54, I think
go- say
54 is all in.
Where's Morris Bridge? Where's Morris Bridge at?
that's about where it's in.
Yeah, somewhere
Right.
right here.
Right in there.
So no apartments then, or no incentives for anything in the Winfield? What is all that area called that's coming out on 56? Two Rivers, all that area?
Correct.
No
It
apartments?
would include all of those new developments,
Mhm.
Winfield, Union Park, River Landing, Two Rivers, all that area, is all in the urban area.
So
Keep in mind.
Well, okay, let's continue this discussion.
I agree.
Like
We need to
Commissioner
understand the
Mario said.
ramifications.
Well, like I said, we just end it now and have that discussion in the public hearing.
Well, so we need to send something to the LPA though. So what I'm hearing is the only thing in debate is the urban fees for apartments.
That's it.
Okay, so we can create a different page for that one fee and just let the planning commission know that's still being debated. But that's the only fee that that's being talking about.
So is a condo complex different than an apartment
So
complex?
yes,
Yes.
but I'm sensitive to what Terry said from a land use zoning perspective, but our fee schedule does have a different rate for condos.
And the other thing is, you know, I recently talked about accessory dwelling units and tiny homes. And so, you know, putting more units on a lot for infill workforce housing, is this gonna affect that? I mean, what?
Well, so right now, those accessory dwelling units generally are paying the multifamily rate.
I mean, I wanna try and incentivize that. What about tiny homes,
Yeah.
multiple units on a,
So tiny home, there's a lower, if it's a tiny home, it would be in the lowest size house, which is 0 to 1,500. It pays a lower fee than the other larger size house.
so what is the what is the definition of an apartment? I guess I should ask.
It would be a rental unit. Whereas the condominium,
What do you mean a rental unit? Then a house could be an apartment if it's rented?
No,
So
no.
what's more-
Generally, a
I wanna
multi-story
hear-
rental unit.
Multi-story rental.
It's not a townhome because we have a different rate for townhomes. It's not a high-rise condo because we have a different rate for high-rise condo. So it's a multi-story rental unit.
And it could be how many how many make up an apartment complex? I mean, are we limiting any building or up to 10, up to 500? Is there a size limitation to what we're
No,
talking about?
we just charge per unit on mobility fees, so.
So if someone wants to build one building with 8 rental apartment units, which is very common in an urban infill kind of setting, right? They would be discouraged with this?
If you can't afford $300 more, you shouldn't be in the business. Let's put it that way.
It's $300 a unit, it's not
Yeah,
$300.
That's, a unit, that's what I mean. Well, you're talking, if it's a 6 unit, whatever, you can't afford $300 more, that you're in the wrong game. Bottom line.
So,
Not very much.
If you can't afford that, then you can't,
To answer your
you
question,
definitely
yes,
can't afford to
any-
build an apartment complex.
even a small apartment complex would be subject to the same treatment, if that's your question.
I would make that argument to a hotel business. If you can't pay $1,000 to help, for a mobility fee for a hotel, maybe you should be building one.
Are you building an apartment complex down the road from your house or something?
No, but I deal with workforce a lot, and I'm on the work committee. I mean, we have a shortage of workforce housing, so
And that's where, and then what we're talking
I
about.
think we have to be careful.
Where it needs to
We're hitting the little
go.
guy, that's
Yeah.
the problem.
Where it needs to go is what we're talking about. It's, you're gonna have those incentives, you know? But anyways, can we just continue
We'll
this
have some
discussion?
time to research it, and we'll talk about it at a later date. It's gonna go to the planning commission, you said? They're
To the
gonna,
planning commission before it comes back to the board.
okay, and they'll have the same discussion on what they feel the fee
So
should be.
we will call out that issue to the planning commission and get a very specific recommendation from them on that issue. Because what I'm hearing is that the rest, other than the mini storage, where we're gonna remove their incentive, which it sounds like there's consensus on that, that's the only issue for debate, is this multifamily in the urban area. Does that sound right?
Not multifamily, apartments.
Apartments in the urban area, sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I'm in agreement, too.
okay.
And maybe I would be more supportive if there was apartments of a number of units or higher. These giant apartment complexes.
I would consider
Maybe we
having
wouldn't
that
wanna
discussion. I can,
limit the little ones.
I mean, that's, if you're concerned about that, but I think what you're concerned about will still be fine, because in the market you're discussing, they're going to have those incentives built in already, that
Well,
much
they have a
market area.
separate fee.
Yeah,
Right? And the granularity of your fee structure, you need to remember that, right? I mean, and David, it might be beneficial to just quickly read those 3 or 4 different categories so that the board has that in top of mind, right? I mean, you've got multiple categories. There's pretty good granularity to be able to recognize the workforce multifamily separately from the market rate multifamily.
yeah.
We have this multifamily that is sponsored by our community development department is a separate rate.
Yes.
Like, what was, okay, that one we approved last week, what was that considered? And I know they already are incentivized by 0% being in the West Market area, but
I don't think that one was a
Just the
affordable.
Spanish.
I don't believe that was.
but that's how they termed it, affordable.
Yeah, but I don't know if they got sponsorship from our community development department to be that. I mean, to be considered affordable under the SHIP regulations, it has to have certain restrictions that keep it affordable. I don't know if that project, they may have just said they were gonna be affordable, but that's different than deed restricting your property to make sure it stays affordable.
Okay.
The one in the fee schedule is one where they deed restricted their property to make sure it stays affordable.
Gotcha.
And they do income checks and everything else, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And those are always full too. Don't forget, when there's always gonna be wait lists for those. Okay, there's 2 different concerns. Okay, there's always gonna be wait lists for those, and the same with the affordable, senior housing. There's always gonna be a wait list for those. You're not gonna run into that same situation.
Okay, so I think we have pretty good direction unless you, okay, Bill?
I'm good. Okay, so we're good, board's good?
I think we know what to do for the next step.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Excellent.
15 minutes early.
Very good. I wasn't there.
Could have gone quicker, though.